My parents tried to take over my wedding plans, so I cancelled the wedding and had a private ceremony. I always thought my wedding day would be the most magical day of my life. Growing up, I imagined the dress, the flowers, the venue, and of course the love of my life standing next to me. As a little girl, I'd even dream about what song would play as I walked down the aisle and how my guests would tear up at the sight of it all. However, never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that my parents would try to control every detail of it, turning what was supposed to be my dream day into a stress-filled battleground. From the moment my fiancé and I announced our engagement, it became clear that my parents had their own vision of what our wedding should be. At first, it started small. My mother suggested a particular venue that she thought would be perfect. "It's where your cousin got married," she said, her eyes lighting up at the thought. While I appreciated her suggestion, I had always imagined something more intimate, something that felt more personal to me and my fiancé. I gently declined, explaining my own ideas, but that's when the subtle manipulation started. "Oh, honey, but it's tradition," my mother would say with a tight smile. "You know how much your grandparents loved that place. Don't you want to honor them?" I felt a pang of guilt in that moment. The thought of disappointing my family made my heart sink. But I kept reminding myself that this was our day, mine and my fiancé's, and it should reflect us, not someone else's preferences. As the days went on, my parents' involvement escalated. My father, who usually remained hands-off in these matters, suddenly had opinions about the guest list. "We should invite so-and-so, their family after all," he'd say, referring to distant relatives I barely knew or hadn't seen in years. I tried to explain that we wanted a smaller, more intimate wedding, but my father wouldn't have it. "A wedding is a family event. You can't just exclude people." And just like that, the guest list ballooned beyond anything I had ever envisioned. I felt like I was losing control of my own wedding. The discussions that were once about love and joy were now tense, stressful arguments about who needed to be included and why my ideas were constantly being brushed aside. My fiancé, bless his heart, tried to remain neutral in all of this. He would listen patiently as I vented my frustrations late into the night. He always said, "It's your decision. Whatever you want, I'm here to support you." But as the tension with my parents grew, it began to weigh on us as a couple. What should have been an exciting time for us had become a source of conflict, and I found myself crying more often than smiling. Things took a particularly nasty turn when it came to the wedding dress. I had always pictured myself in something simple, elegant, and a little non-traditional. But my mother, she had other plans. "You need to wear a ball gown. It's classic. It's what everyone will expect." I remember standing in the bridal shop, looking at the dress she had chosen for me, feeling like I was suffocating. It was beautiful, sure, but it wasn't me. I didn't feel like myself in it. When I voiced this to her, she frowned, clearly disappointed. "Don't be ridiculous. You'll regret not going with something timeless. It's not just about you, it's about everyone who will be there. You need to make a statement." That was the moment something shifted inside me. As much as I loved my parents and valued their input, I realized I couldn't continue compromising on every little thing. This was my wedding, and I was starting to feel like a guest at my own event. My fiancé and I had begun this journey with excitement and joy, but now it was a never-ending series of compromises, trying to make everyone else happy while losing sight of what we wanted. The final straw came a few weeks before the big day. My parents, unbeknownst to me, had reached out to the florist and made changes to the flower arrangements. They claimed they were just helping out because they thought my choices weren't grand enough. When I found out, I was furious. Not only had they overstepped a boundary, but they had done so behind my back, completely disregarding my wishes. I couldn't believe how out of control things had become. I called my mother that evening, and for the first time in my life, I put my foot down. "Mum, you can't keep doing this. This is my wedding, not yours. I love you, but I need you to step back." There was a long pause on the other end of the phone before she finally replied, her voice icy. "I'm just trying to make sure it's perfect for you, but if you don't appreciate it, then fine, do whatever you want." That conversation left me feeling torn. I didn't want to hurt my parents, but I also couldn't continue down this path. After another sleepless night of agonizing over the situation, I turned to my fiancé and said the words I hadn't been able to admit to myself until that moment. I don't want this wedding anymore. He looked at me with concern. What do you mean? Do you want to postpone it? But it wasn't about postponing. It was about reclaiming control. No, I said quietly, I want to cancel it. I can't do this anymore. I just want to marry you, without all of this pressure. We spent the next few days discussing what that would look like. The thought of cancelling the big wedding we had been planning for months was daunting, but the more we talked, the more it felt right. We didn't need hundreds of guests, or a fancy venue, or extravagant flowers to make our day special. We just needed each other. I knew telling my parents would be difficult, but I also knew it was necessary. When I finally broke the news, they were stunned. My mother cried, insisting that I was making a mistake. My father was more pragmatic, though clearly disappointed. You're really going to do this? After all the planning, he asked. Yes, I said firmly, because it's what we want. We cancelled the big wedding and opted for a private ceremony with just a few close friends. It was held in a beautiful, quiet spot in nature, exactly the kind of intimate setting we had always dreamed of. There were no grand speeches, no over-the-top decorations, just love and simplicity. I wore the dress I had originally fallen in love with, and for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. The ceremony was everything I had hoped for. As I walked down the aisle, albeit a much smaller and less traditional one, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. It was no longer about pleasing others or living up to expectations. It was about celebrating the love between my fiancé and me, the way we wanted. Looking back, I realized that cancelling the wedding was the best decision we could have made. It wasn't easy, and it came with its share of heartache, especially in navigating my relationship with my parents. But ultimately, it allowed us to take back control of our day and celebrate it in a way that truly reflected who we are as a couple. In the weeks following the ceremony, my parents eventually came around. They were hurt at first, but I think they started to understand why I made the choice I did. We had some tough conversations, but it led to a deeper understanding between us. I learned that it's okay to set boundaries, even with the people you love the most, and that sometimes standing up for yourself means disappointing others. But that's okay. Marriage is about the two people committing to each other, not the show or the spectacle. I'm grateful that in the end, we were able to focus on what truly mattered, each other. And that's something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life.